You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Loman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Loman.
Hey everybody, welcome to the House of Sunny podcast. Last week we discussed Harry and Meghan, and you guys who supposedly don't follow it and don't care, I certainly got a lot of comments. I think it was the most commented on episode we've had in a while. Today we're going to talk about the Green New Deal, and not just about the Green New Deal, but its implementation, everybody, because they're doing it. And that's my message to you today. They are implementing the Green New Deal. You thought it was crazy. We're going to go over it again. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how freaking mainstream this thing is becoming, because we may have to go Virginia on these people, right? Mm-hmm. We may have to show up in crowds to stop this shit. Of course, I live in California, so it's already half implemented out here. Yeah. We'll talk about that. But, okay. So Harry and Meghan, though, we've had a few developments. I'm just going to briefly, I'm just going to answer a question, because I thought this was a very good point somebody raised. They were like, maybe this is the only way to get out of the royal family is to sort of run and then make it really public so that they can't really prevent it.
They can't kill you like they did Diana.
They can't kill you. They can't, right? And, you know, with all of this stuff that's come up with the, like, these things that you thought were crazy, and now you realize that everybody in power is a crazy pedophile, and that there are all these murders, and the people in power are really sick at a level that we just really could not believe. If you're like a decent person, you go, oh no, of course there's a few pedophiles, but not everyone at Disney, right? Well, right. Wrong. Everyone at Disney, like the people, Tom Hanks maybe, you know what I mean? Allegedly. Yeah. Okay. So that comment I thought was valid and worthy of sharing, because, you know, it puts a different light on this. If you got into the royal family and you were like, oh my God, these people are sick and we need to get out.
Yeah, but that's a pretty generous interpretation, because I think Meghan is saying, I want to get out and go to an even worse place, Hollywood.
Well, yes. I was going to say, I can believe that somewhat, except
this isn't sick enough.
Yeah, right.
I thought this was going to be like sex parties at the Rothschild estate and, you know, the Illuminati type shit. And this is actually kind of boring. I actually have to do stuff.
Boring and stuffy and British.
I got to get back to Bel Air.
Right. And that I do believe that, because I think she's horrible. Nobody will change my mind about that. There've just been too many little pieces of evidence of her just utter pathetic narcissism, you know, and self-absorption. So, all right. But valid point, listener out there, thank you very much for those comments. You guys love the royal family, even though you say you don't. You're a bunch of hypocrites.
That's right.
Here's the Green New Deal, folks. Okay. So the Green New Deal came out, and we all made fun of it because it was ridiculous. Let me just refresh your memory. In order to solve what is this imminent threat, like basically we have 10 years to completely transform our society, or we're all dead.
That's right.
We have to provide free college, guaranteed jobs, free food, free healthy food, which to them means plants, free health care.
Not poison.
Safe, affordable, adequate housing. In other words, cheap housing, but really awesome housing for cheap, which is exactly what they did in, East Germany, in those big concrete block housing, and in the Soviet Union, and that was wonderful. People loved that.
Or Chicago,
running through freaking.
Look at public housing.
Yeah, look at Chicago. That's what they are talking about. But they love saying it'll be safe and adequate. Don't worry, adequate. Can you imagine what they consider adequate for your needs? Because they don't think that you should eat meat. So they think the grass is adequate for your diet, you know? That's adequate.
Yeah, you live in a box and eat grass. You're good to go.
Okay. And then every building in America needs to be torn down and rebuilt. That's no big
That's right.
deal, right?
Oh yeah, just that'll
So,
take a couple weeks.
on and on like that. Like it was just completely insane. And we're all going, ha 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 ha. Like that's some crazy progressives. He sits down and he goes, if unicorns were real, what would I just want unicorn land to look like? You know?
Hmm. Yeah.
And then he writes that list. And that's what Ocasio-Cortez. Okay. But the scary part is she turned that into a congressional resolution, that weird paper that talked about cow farts and eliminating airplanes. She turned that into a congressional resolution. She took out some of the craziest stuff, or reworded it actually. She changed cow farts, worrying about cow flatulence, into working with farmers to develop sustainable farming and agriculture, which basically means eliminating cow farts, but just said in a way that isn't so funny and amateurish.
Mm-hmm.
So she reworks it. She submits it to Congress. 70 House members co-sponsored it. That's like a lot of people.
Yeah. Not
And-
two,
Yeah.
not one, 70.
70, and probably more since. Actually, I don't know the actual number anymore. And that was when the Republicans had control of the House. So imagine what that number would be today. So, okay. So even with that, we're like, okay, yeah, funny, haha, you take a big stand, whatever. Well, now we are seeing, it's been a couple years, and we're really seeing that all of these ideas are mainstream. They've become mainstream. I mean, some of these were already kind of mainstream Democrat platform ideas anyway, like free college. I mean, kind of. But in this latest presidential debate round, and we're seeing who's filtering to the top. It's Warren, it's Bernie, it's people who say guaranteed job, universal income, free college, free food, free healthcare, cheap housing, cheap, adequate, awesome housing. And Elizabeth Warren said the other day that she would support a moratorium on all new construction in the United States of America. So that's one of the top presidential contenders has said that. I mean, this is so radical. And I don't know what it is. Like, why don't people hear that and go, oh my God, like, why aren't people kind of freaking out? Because I think they don't think it's real, or they're not connecting what she's saying to reality. And I feel like that's kind of what has happened out here in California too. Everybody has supported all this stuff. They've passed a bill out here where each person will be allotted 55 gallons of water a day and no more. And that covers like basically a load of laundry. So if you want to take a shower and do a load of laundry on the same day, you're out of luck. And they've actually passed that bill. And of course, they don't implement it for 2 or 3 years, right? So they pass it and kind of kick the can, and then one day it'll just kind of be your reality. And this is who these people are. This is this radical, crazy agenda. And one day you wake up and your life will just be so different. And they really do want to do this to us. So if we don't kind of listen to what they're saying and take them seriously, which is, I guess, my message today, they're actually implementing this, folks. They're trying to take your meat away from you. That's the other thing I was going to say, is this push for everybody to be vegan. I don't know if you've noticed how loud this has gotten. In our
it's
culture.
everywhere.
It's everywhere. Golden Globes served vegan meals this year. And everything's sort of downstream from culture, right? So the top Hollywood award show is virtue signaling and telling all of you how you need to be by having a vegan meal serving a vegan meal to everybody. Doug, do you know any vegans?
Yeah.
What do they look like? Do they look sick?
I think they're liars.
Yeah.
No, they don't look healthy. I mean, I've seen people that are vegetarianish, and they don't look healthy. They're usually actually overweight because
Yeah.
they eat a ton of carbs.
Right.
And I think they just eat muffins and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, vegetarian is a little better because then you get dairy and you get eggs and you do get animal products and you can have
I guess I
animal
don't
fat.
know any really strict vegans. I guess I don't know that.
I've met some vegans.
Everyone seems to pay lip service to it. Like it's an immutable law of nature that if you only eat these plants, somehow that's more healthy for you, which has never been verified or validated in any way. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
You saying that they're liars is really funny because that's exactly what I've heard other people say. I was going to go on the carnivore diet, so I was doing a bunch of research for that and watching a bunch of videos and heard a lot of people talking about vegans and people who had been vegans going carnivore, things like that, which is hilarious. Two extremes. I think people who do extreme dieting kind of have the same mentality. So the vegans and the carnivores are kind of the same personality types, you know? But vegan people really do look unhealthy. They have thin hair, they're pale, they're often puffy. They might be skinny, but they look kind of puffy and weird. Or they're eating animal products. And I actually had a vegan staying with me for a little while. She was one of a nanny we were trying out that didn't work out. And she was very strict vegan, but then she would have these kind of weird binging. She actually, I would say, binged every day. So even when she was strict vegan.
That's not a binge.
Even when she was strict vegan, it would be like, 2 or 3 potatoes. She would just have these massive quantities of food, or, she'd eat an entire carton of blueberries, not just like a serving of blueberries or something. And in one sitting, she would just kind of shove all this food in her face. And then I, of course, am practically paleo, so I'm eating all this meat, and she would smell that and go, "Oh my God!" It would almost become like you're watching a bulimic. And she would eat it and binge it and eat a huge quantity of animal fat and products. And she looked really unhealthy. She had this sort of thin hair. I mean, she looked like a vegan, but she was binging animal products every few days. So I don't know, man. I just think you're right. I think, and people were saying, like, I was doing all this research and there were physicians and stuff talking about it and talking about how vegans tend to binge animal products. They kind of go crazy and they go buy like a whole chicken and they eat the whole chicken and the bones and everything and the skin, and they just like sit there and shove it in because they're so hungry for food. And there's no question that human beings are meant to eat meat. I mean, that is science, dude. That's like, the science is settled on that. Can we agree?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years we've been around eating meat. So it's weird. And why would you want to make humans stop eating meat? Except if you really do just kind of want to crush people. You just want to make them sick, and you want to put them in a concrete block house that's adequate, or building that's adequate, and you want to feed them plants, which is barely adequate. They'll be like alive but unhealthy. That's what you want to do to people? What is wrong with you?
Well, here's what strikes me about this. And I see this all the time. And I think this is probably one of the most important points here when you're fighting against this, which is if you look at this Green New Deal stuff and all the things we're talking about, and your first reaction or your argument to someone is, "Oh, that's crazy. That'll never work." You've lost the argument right there. And what I mean by that is you never imply that, "Oh, well, this is good," or it might be good, or it's reasonable, but it'll just never work. It's just impractical. Because that concedes the moral high ground to your enemy. These people it's not just that they're impractical, because they don't care about being impractical. They're immoral, and they want to kill people.
They really do. They really do.
And the biggest tell here is, I'm sorry, Sonny, but the biggest tell is there's no acknowledgement. First of all, I heard Tom Woods make this analogy. It was awesome, which is like, if you really think the world's going to end, like there's a meteor coming to the Earth and we're all going to die, which is the premise of this entire thing, is the first thing you'd say, like, oh, we got to increase the minimum wage and have adequate housing and free college. I mean, that, like, so right away, that's like huge tell number one is that this isn't really a crisis, because nothing they're saying addresses the fact that this is really a crisis, because they want all these other things that just put them in power. The second big tell is there's no acknowledgement. In other words, the biggest tell that they really don't care about humans, and in fact, they want to kill you and just control you, is that there's no acknowledgement of the benefits of industrial civilization or cheap energy. They're not saying, okay, look, we know cheap energy has made everybody safer, and it's made us, it's insulated us from, chaotic environment and the randomness and hostility of nature and storms, and it's brought peace and tranquility and civil society to people around the globe, and it's increased our life expectancies, blah blah blah. Cheap energy is the driver of industrial civilization and blah blah blah. But hey, we just have to acknowledge that these fossil fuels are increasing. This is something we have to really recognize, and maybe we have to cut back or look at alternatives like nuclear, which anyone who was serious about actually helping people, who was genuinely concerned about CO2 emissions, would immediately say, well, we have to go to nuclear and just work out the technology there better. And so that's tell number two, is there's no acknowledgement of that. It's just, we have to throttle you. We have to herd people up like they're like human chattel, and have this Soviet-style command and control economy where we're going to herd you into these public housing projects and you're going to eat grass. And I mean, this is really, really evil stuff. And like you said, Sonny, they do this in a way that, and I think we can learn from this. They propose this outlandish scheme, like get rid of airplanes and, reconstruct houses and everything else. And everyone on the right kind of says, oh, that's crazy, they'll never do that. And then we immediately concede the moral high ground instead of saying, you're immoral, you're evil.
I don't even think we do that. I think we take, it's so crazy. It's almost like it's a tactic that gets you to not take it seriously, because it's so crazy that you don't even fight it. I mean, I don't even think, like, we laugh at it and then we walk away because we're like, that'll never happen.
Exactly.
And 2 years later, it's happening.
It's happening. Like the transgender thing.
Yes, that's a perfect example, is that, 5 years ago, if you'd said that men would be going into, let's even go to the worst example, that young men would have access to girls in locker rooms in high schools who were naked. And that they would also be playing on their sports teams and beating them all and taking all of their sports future and credit and winning away from them. You would be like, never is that going to happen. Or that there would be basically what are trans strippers in libraries talking to 5-year-olds and doing sexual movements and things like that, and basically being strippers in front of 5-6-year-olds, that would also be something that if you go against, you're a bad guy. You would think that was absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
And that's just 5 years ago. And this thing comes out, we're going to ban cows, and we all go, ha, 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 ha. Hey, by the way, guess who else? Like, they talked about the reason that cows have to be banned is because they produce methane, which causes CO2 to rise. Guess who else farts? People.
Well, guess who else breathes out CO2?
Right. Burping is another, apparently, methane producer. So,
besides breathing.
Which, by the way, when
farting.
you eat plants, you burp a lot more, I think, right? I don't really have that problem, but so they say cows fart, we got to get rid of cows, and we all go, yeah, right. And then 2 years later, I'm hearing all of this stuff about how if you want to save the earth, you have to stop eating meat and dairy. And you know how much, if you can hook your agenda to climate change, you basically have won. Because being a climate denier or whatever, like they've just really controlled the governments and the culture.
Yeah, they have a whole
Environmentalism is
Orwellian
totally in
language
charge.
around. They have Orwellian language around this, and what they've done is
I wouldn't
create a
even say it's
religion.
Orwellian. It's religious. Like it's Orwellian too, but I mean, it sounds to me more like you're a heretic, you're
Yes.
shunned, and it's complete. Like most people don't question that you should be recycling. If you don't recycle, you're a bad guy, even though recycling is so clearly more resource heavy than just throwing stuff in the trash. And I love the
Right.
story about how, this is a side thing, but we've been recycling all our plastic instead of putting it in a landfill. And we've been selling it to China, who's then just dumping it in the ocean.
Well,
Well, okay, so my point is, so 2 years on, I'm hearing a lot of stuff about veganism. And I know, as a person with health issues who's very conscientious about diet, veganism is the least healthy diet possible. That's just a fact. And I know there are a lot of people who think otherwise, but that to me, like there's this movie that came out saying you can be a vegan and be like an athlete. You have to be really careful. It is such a radical, difficult diet. If you aren't really, really, really careful, make sure that you're measuring everything and doing math all the time, you could not do that. And so that alone to me is proof that it's not the best diet. Like the fact that I can even eat the standard American diet and go run a marathon, which isn't a very healthy diet, but at least gives you enough energy to run a marathon or whatever. Veganism is worse than the standard American diet. Worse for you because you have to do math every day to make sure that you can, that you're not in the hospital. So and what I'm seeing now is mild pressure. Like Hollywood, everybody's talking about it. AOC is saying, hey, young people, here's how you personally can change the climate. Go vegan, stop using disposable razors. It's just part of the list. And 2 more years from now, I don't know where we're going to be with this. It might be hard to get meat. It might be taxed. They may try to tax meat suppliers out of business or regulate them out of business. We don't know where this is going exactly in terms of regulation. Probably they'll do it in some underhanded way, like regulate them out of business, which is what they do in California.
Turn off their bank.
Turn off their banks, right?
PayPal,
yeah,
and banks and MasterCard won't accept credit cards from meat manufacturers.
Yeah, exactly. They'll cancel, they'll deplatform, or out here it's like they wanted to stop the farmers from using so much water, so they just passed a bunch of regulations and they poured fresh water into the ocean. It's like they know how to do it. They do it in a sideways way.
But
and you don't object to saving the smelt, do you? So it's not a bill to harm the farmers. It's a bill to save the smelt. That's how they do it.
Well, they have this automatic sort of moral claim on everyone with the way in which they approach this as a religion, because and this is the danger in saying things like, oh, that's just impractical, and accepting some of their premises. And one of the premises that is really insidious, and I think it colors everything that's going on, is the idea of the value of climate or the value of the earth apart from human life. So if you accept that the earth is some sort of intrinsic value, like a god, apart from your own needs in life, the earth is valuable to us because we live on the earth and we need air to breathe and we need food and we need all the things that the earth provides for us. But if we didn't exist, the earth isn't like a thing. It's not like they anthropomorphize it. They almost make it like a living, they literally do that. Mother Earth. that it's almost like a human entity that's to be valued and worshiped and enshrined apart from our own life. In fact, you're supposed to sacrifice for it. You have to keep it clean and healthy and thriving, whatever that all means, because it's indefinable. But they've shorn the concept of value from life and from our own self-interest and our own concept of flourishing, and the fact that our nature is that we have to use the earth constantly to exist. We burn wood and we eat animals, and we build buildings out of things and so on and so forth. We're constantly using the earth for everything we do. They've created a kind of like a wish, just like they always do, where somehow we're going to survive without using the earth. And to the extent that you don't use it, you're a good guy. And so if you can deny yourself and have this sort of like ascetic, monk-like existence where you're not impacting the earth in any way, you have no carbon footprint, which is a kind of original sin, then you're good. You're like, a saint in the desert who's existing without using the earth, because then you're benefiting this climate thing without impacting. I mean,
that's today's standard. Tomorrow's standard will be suicide. And it already is, like not having babies. I don't know if like having babies is an environmentally friendly thing to do.
Well,
like let's reduce the human population. That's normal today, actually, on the left. You're hearing that from all the young people right now. We're already in a like crazy population decrease in the West. Not so in the developing world, but in the West we are. And then on top of that, they want young people to stop having babies.
Well, in that way, environmentalism is even worse than the major religions, because at least the major religions
I was just gonna
offer
say that.
some like individual salvation, and you're important in the eyes of God. I mean, they're saying, no, the earth is God, doesn't want you at all. You're you're impacting the earth. Get away. You all should die.
They're kind of human genocidal.
Freely.
They're kind of about that. And I also don't really believe it. Like, I think they're just nihilists. And they really do want power over people. And they don't care if lots of people die. And what they're talking about would actually kill a lot of people. If you cut fossil fuels, and this Green New Deal says net zero greenhouse gas emissions. Mm-hmm. They want, and they say, 10-year plan to mobilize every aspect of American society at a scale not seen since World War II. And by that they mean to pay for it, and they even say later in the document that something like 50% of GDP was put back into the economy during World War II. So something like that might be necessary. So they're going to take all of our wealth and they're going to crush the fossil fuel industry. So how many jobs would that kill immediately? And then promote this renewable energy thing, which doesn't work, but let's not even go there. But let's say they do it. How many tens of millions of people would die within 5 years? I mean, a lot. Like tens of millions of people would die.
You can't even conceive of life. I mean, if your power goes out right now for an hour, how crazy are you? Anyone who's listening to this who's had their power go out,
right?
If there's a storm or something happens,
I can't charge my iPhone. But let's get serious. What else do we connect to power? Heat, air. People die from heat. People die from cold. It's 40 below wind chills in Minnesota right now.
So if you care about human life, you'd say, well, fossil fuels, cheap energy is the way to protect us from nature and to make our lives livable and makes life possible and enjoyable for billions of people. And the people that don't have cheap energy are the people who are in poverty. And so any honest observer would say, oh, cheap fossil fuels and energy is a huge, huge value. You would start with that premise, but they want to destroy that. I mean, and this is sort of, you're right. It's like it's genocidal.
It is genocidal. And okay, so that came out. We all read that and we all knew that. We said, okay, if you eliminate airplanes, you eliminate cows, you tear down all the buildings. And you get rid of all fossil fuels, all within 10 years, how many tens of millions of people would die? Lots. And we all knew that was nuts for that reason, right? And I thought, this isn't going to really happen. But now we have every presidential candidate, every major presidential candidate has signed on to this Green New Deal, including rational people, otherwise rational people like Tulsi Gabbard.
In Europe, the Eurozone has actually passed it. They've passed a version of this.
Have they really?
Yeah.
What?
They have like a zero emission plan for 2050. Yeah, look it up. I just read an article yesterday.
2050, so 30 years, not 10 years.
Yeah, zero emissions.
How dare you? That's not good enough.
Yeah, I thought, well, we'll be dead by 2050
They
anyway.
said 10 years. This is
That's
an
right.
emergency. I just, when I heard Elizabeth Warren say that she supported a total moratorium on construction, that was for me the bell ringing and saying, they're doing it, folks. They're actually putting this into practice.
And look at how they tie the moral idealism of World War II to this, as if, and this is really what
good
they're
point.
after. It's really what they're after
Yeah.
is because, I remember reading an article and I blogged about this guy who was lamenting the fact that our generation doesn't have a cause like the civil rights. This is a leftist saying, boy, I wish our generation had a cause like civil rights, or now they're going to World War II. This kind of thing that would give our lives existential meaning that without a crisis, without some
Yes.
object for which they can sacrifice, and
Without a looming apocalypse.
without a looming apocalypse, you cannot find meaning in life. As if
The old
Steve
American
Jobs,
way of living a good life and making something and creating something is supposedly, that's
That's
what
a
that's the
meaningless,
American sense of life right there.
crude-
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like Thomas Edison, he lives a life of innovation and invention and business, and and Steve Jobs or Henry Ford or any of the great inventors or scientists or business people or even entertainers or musicians or artists who live a life of like productive achievement. To them, he dismisses that. This was Dana Milbank, by the way. He's like a pundit out there who was saying this. But the idea being that without a crisis, pending combat, or like a war or something like that, like life is meaningless, as if you can't. And this is a key to their psychology because, they can't find meaning in life without that. And so they veer, and you see this in their love of politics and their love of control, because who knows what the psychological premises are here, but I never thought I look at the lack of an existential crisis as being a symptom of a healthy society. Like, fantastic,
Right.
We don't have an apocalypse. I can live every day and enjoy my life and produce and build and, go out with friends and have a good time and enjoy my life. That's a cause for celebration. He's lamenting that. Like, that's an empty existence, a meaningless existence. So they create this kind of crisis. And, you could be cynical and jaded, of course, and just say, well, this is just, the old left trying to find a way to justify and consolidate their own power, which is completely true.
But it
on the other hand, I
resonates
think
with
there
people.
are
I think what you're saying is
that's the more important point.
so okay, yeah,
As if
maybe
it's
they're power mongering nihilists, but it has motivated a generation. I mean, these sincere young people washing out their plastic and separating it out and like taking all this time to have a low carbon footprint, and feel like they're very sincere about it. They feel like they're doing something. Maybe they go vegan.
Yeah, it's like taking the sacraments at church.
Yeah.
It's a ritual form of purification and catharsis or something. Where you're going through these ritual acts that absolve you of your sin, your original sin, which is the fact that as humans we have to reshape the earth to exist. So by offering some sort of penance, which you can never escape because as a human, you have to breathe, you have to use the earth in some way. The only thing you can do is, yes. And the only thing you can do in the face of this is reduce, reuse, recycle, whatever their, slogan is, because that's your form of penance. That's like going to church on Sundays and offering a sacrifice to the God. And, that really does resonate with people. And look at the Greta thing. Here's a young, psychopath who's, clearly like mentally ill. And there's actually been documented cases of, they call it climate change madness or something like that, where there are people who literally, this is like a psychological disorder now. People think that by drinking water or, eating meat or something like that, that every action they take is impinging on the sacred earth. And so they literally go mad. They go crazy.
Well, did you see that it turned out that her dad was writing all her Facebook posts and
yes,
some other activists, which we knew anyway. Yeah. We knew there were people behind her. She's not that clever and she's not that educated.
But I'm just urging people not to just see this cynically or to just, like you said, just pass it off and say, oh, that's impractical. You have to reassert, instead of saying, well, that's dumb, you have to reassert the value of human life and center your whole argument around what's the best for our lives as human beings on the planet and how do we use the earth. And yes, if there's a legitimate problem that's going to actually impact humans in a way that's more negative, then yeah, let's approach it, but approach it from the aspect of how do we make human life better, not the false moral ideal of an impactless kind of unicorn and rainbows, where we somehow exist without using the earth and seeing the earth or as some sort of mother figure, or a god, Gaia, or whatever they call it.
I
don't accept it.
I don't want to say that we can't mock it or we can't just be like, that's crazy, or say, I can't wait for free college to save the climate. I mean, those are the kinds of things that should be done. Absolutely. Because that does work in the culture.
I don't mean that.
But also, I think, and increasingly I do this with other topics too, like universal healthcare. It's like the pile of dead bodies that you're talking about creating here for this dream of communist, and I throw out that word, communist, takeover of everything, because it's communist. I throw out the word communist. I throw out the word dead bodies all the time, which I got from that really great author, what's his name, Kors. I'm going to tell you his actual name. I'm just going to look it up here. What is it? Michael Kors? No, that's a designer.
Are you thinking of Michael Crichton?
No, who's the guy? He did this great lecture about communism, and he's an author, and he's a long time fighter against communism. Of course, he's not going to come up quickly on my Google search here. Anyway, I don't know. He talks about the dead bodies, the piles of dead bodies. That's how he will start any lecture about communism. And I think that's really important. And so I use that term too. And then I also say stuff like, this isn't how Americans solve problems. I like to say that because I think there's still cachet in that.
Yes.
And in fact, I know there is, even in this Green New Deal, there's this section here where they say, listen to this. This just goes to what you were saying. They're trying to motivate people with this, this huge challenge that we can face, and our generation, we haven't had that, so we get motivated by that. It says here, Americans
love that.
Americans love a challenge. This is our moonshot. When JFK said we'd go to the moon by the end of the decade, people said it was impossible. If Eisenhower wanted to build the interstate highway system today, people would ask how we'd pay for it. When FDR called on America to build 185,000 planes to fight World War II, every business leader, CEO, and general laughed at him. At the time, the U.S. had produced 3,000 planes in the past year. By the end of the war, we produced 300,000 planes. That's what we're capable of if we have real leadership.
You know what's funny about that, just like on the face, is that those are all technological challenges that have real solutions, because there is a science where you can take a rocket to the moon. It just requires work and effort
or build a highway system or
what they're saying is we have to find a way, to make 2 + 2 5. And we just, it sounds impossible, but if we work hard enough, we'll make 2 + 2 5. And what I mean by that is, like, they want an impossibility. They want humans not to use the Earth. They want an energy source that's reliable, that is not going to have any impact whatsoever on anything. They want unicorns and rainbows. This is like, and so they use the language of science and technology and technological progress and human innovation to try and motivate people towards an impossibility, towards a dream, a wish.
I wonder if someday we'll look at this. I wonder if someday we'll look at this environmentalism thing as, historically looking at it, the fall of Christianity and the rise of environmentalism. Mm-hmm. Like, it definitely seems like people want some kind of greater meaning or to their world, something spiritual and mystical, and people have really latched onto this.
It is. It's a total coastal urban religion.
And European.
And you see it, yeah, in all those centers.
Which is very atheist.
The sort of like Hollywood, LA, New York, Brooklyn, the people that don't have meaning in their lives, who are looking for meaning outside of their own lives and careers and work, they see meaning in that. And I think there is a psychological drive towards this kind of meaning. And then, when you combine that with this veneer of scientific plausibility where, oh no, the scientists all agree that we're all going to, and of course they never contextualize that and say, well, okay, yeah, it might be true that the temperature's risen, but how much? How much is disastrous? How can we model that? What's the trade-off? In other words, there's a scientific solution to this. And it doesn't imply that command and control is right either. Even if it's true that the temperature's going up, I would think we'd want even more liberty. We'd want to liberate capitalists and entrepreneurs to not only find solutions, but to find ways to cope with, maybe we need more air conditioners.
Look at SpaceX,
if it's going to be hot.
Free it up. Look what's happening. And you're right. And I think that, and to emphasize, that's the American way. Americans solve problems with freedom. And that isn't to say that we don't need government sometimes to solve problems. And, if you have somebody polluting a river, you need government to step in and stop that.
Right.
There's definitely a role for government in environmental, in keeping our environment from being harmful to humans.
When you're proving and providing evidence of human
intervention,
human harm, you're demonstrating specific actual harms, and you can do that scientifically, then absolutely.
Or an asteroid is coming toward Earth. What do? I mean, my solution would probably be, okay, let's get the best, freest minds on this. And what can we give them? What can we give them, to the moon? Let's give them the moon. If you save Earth from this asteroid, you get the moon, and you can mine the fuck out of that, and that's your prize.
No, I would demand higher minimum wage and public housing if a meteor's coming.
Free college, free healthcare, cheap housing, free food, free college, guaranteed job, universal income. You just can't believe the shit they're offering in this thing. The scariest thing for me is my meat. They're going to take away my meat. And with my illness, I have gone paleo, and it's just really critical that that's how I eat. If I had to go vegan, it would probably kill me. Like, it literally would probably kill me. What else is I going to read you from this thing that was just so... I love the language that they use. They say stuff like, this is how sneaky they are. Just listen to this one about planes. Totally overhaul transportation by massively expanding electric vehicle manufacturing, build charging stations everywhere, build out high-speed rail at a scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. So they don't say ground all planes. They say, let's make air travel unnecessary. But you know that that's exactly what they would do. They would ground the planes.
But wait a second. If we plug in cars and have electric vehicles, where are we going to get the energy to make the electricity?
That's from all the windmill farms and the solar farms, and create affordable public transit available to all. We're going to be packed onto trains, folks. And some of us will be sent to camps to be re-educated on those trains, with goal to replace every combustion engine vehicle. Wow. But I love this. Air travel stops becoming necessary. That's how we're going to ground all planes.
So we're going to convert all cars to electricity, which right now is driven primarily by coal and natural gas. So like if you have an electric car, it's basically a coal or natural gas car. You know, the wind and solar is not providing your electricity.
It does use gas, and it only goes a couple hundred miles with all of that wonderful coal and natural. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
not to mention the energy that it takes to build the batteries, which require like rare earth elements and all sorts of other manufacturing processes that are very expensive and very complicated, and that are even have geopolitical implications because the rare earths are in China and places like that.
I think your point is it's all BS. And I think I was reading too that if everybody ate plants, that would also cause a lot of problems for the environment, actually, that plants growing crops is actually pretty destructive to the earth. And you know what I mean? It's not nothing.
Well, of course, there are implications to everything you do. You don't, the science of this is so preposterous and ridiculous. And for them to just, this is how they operate and I think you were saying yesterday, like, I think we should respond to this with our own deal.
Yeah. Oh, can I say what I was going to say? We need a Freedom New Deal. Or maybe that's not the right terminology. If you guys think of a better name, put it in the comments. But I was thinking that we should just literally come up with a wish list, like our unicorn wish list, and ask for the moon, everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, don't say, well,
what does our perfect society look like?
They never say that.
Yeah.
They're fighting the nature of reality and science. We're actually saying, no, we want laissez-faire capitalism.
Eliminate all environmental regulations. What?
Yeah, just rely on the courts, and we want all private property.
How about I say
everything is privately owned?
Something about making the environmental regulations unnecessary.
Yeah, I'd say private property, and I'd say we want to privatize education.
Yes.
While we're freeing the country and liberating the country and creating energy independence, which largely we've done now. We need to privatize the educational system and eliminate college funding or public funding for colleges and even primary schools. Let's go the whole other direction, and let's have them gasp.
Yes. Yep.
And then in a couple of years.
And the cool thing about this Green New Deal has shown me, you don't even have to be very good at writing to write something like this. Like, you can literally just sit down and kind of bust out your fantasy. It doesn't have to be formal.
Remember when AOC said, we're focusing too much on facts?
Yeah.
And she got, everyone kind of laughed at that.
Yeah.
But who's winning?
Right.
She's right.
She's winning. Yeah. And she has, with her casual, pushy activism, she has taken over the Democratic Party. Her first day on the job, maybe you remember, she had a sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office with crazy Green New Deal people. And that was the moment I'm like, oh my God, she just took over. How's Nancy supposed to fight a mob of 30 youngsters in Green New Deal t-shirts and Ocasio-Cortez saying, we need, XYZ. Like, Nancy can't fight that. They're using their own tactics against their own people to take over.
Yeah.
And, I will put this in the notes because this is so good. There's actually speaking of like what we can do, and I don't want to say we should use their tactics totally, but I do think that we should write a free New Deal. And maybe Rand Paul would be somebody who would push that out, or Ted Cruz or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Might be willing to like put that out there on their website or something.
Yeah, for 2020.
Yeah. And where was I going with this? Something but using their I'm going to put in the notes this great video about where AOC came from and this Justice Democrats behind her and how they they interviewed for her job, and they also got Tlaib, whatever her name is, and Omar and some other people. So
they had casting calls. They
backed all of these people, and it's a very radical group, and their stated purpose was to take over the DNC. And now in the news recently, Ocasio-Cortez has this fund that's separate from the DNC, and it's really pissed off the Democrats that she's raising money apart from the party. But her goal is to primary a bunch of moderate Dems. Mm-hmm. And it's going to work because they're more consistent. And just look at the presidential candidates. They're on her side. They've all signed on to this Green New Deal. The things they're saying in this debate are free everything, even for illegals. Free college, free food, free healthcare, cheap house for everybody in the world. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, stop having babies, stop eating meat. You got to wash out your little plastics and pick them apart and everything. And we're going to give all your wealth away to illegal aliens.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds real fun. I don't know why anybody would go for this. Honestly, I can't figure out. They've gotten so crazy. It'll be so interesting to see what happens in 2020 in terms of, does this resonate? Is there a base of people that is still going, yeah, I'll vote for them?
But the thing I like about this Freedom New Deal that we could put forth is that it changes the narrative from us just like poking holes in their theory and
it's an aggressive offense move.
It's reframing the moral spectrum, because we're saying your goals, even if they were practical, your goals are evil. They're going to ruin our lives and kill people. We don't want that. We want policies that support human flourishing and joy and happiness and freedom and benevolence. And here's the basis for our view of human existence, and to make that distinction very clear and make it more a moral ideal that freedom and liberty and capitalism and these are moral ideals that result in untold human happiness and prosperity. And that was sort of like the symbolism of the Make America Great, and this was why Trump was so successful, because he was reframing the whole debate. He wasn't saying, oh, well, let's just oppose the crazy Democrats because they're nuts. He was saying, no, let's make the country great. Fuck those guys. Screw them, you know. And, so we need to completely reframe this and distinguish ourselves from the left. And it's fine to poke holes in it and say, well, this is why they're wrong or this is why they're crazy. But, don't implicitly accept their premises, which is what so many Republicans do. And we call them out on their hypocrisy. We'll say things like, well, Leonardo DiCaprio has, a gigantic mansion and flies private jets. And what a hypocrite. But by doing that, yes, he's a hypocrite. But you're also accepting you're accepting a premise that, air travel is wrong.
Stop traveling on the plane. Right.
And instead say, yeah, he should fly in a private jet, but wouldn't it be great if everybody had a private jet? That would be what if we lived in a world where people were so wealthy, everyone had their own airplane or flying cars?
That we were going to be in that world by now, where we would all be flying, Instead, we're sitting in 5 times the traffic.
I saw a thing once that was like, I was promised flying cars and all I got was 120 characters. like like all the technology. It's all now so that we have Twitter.
It's all kept us at home. Okay, I did find this guy's name. His name is Alan Charles Kors. And if you go to Google and just kind of look up his name, his last name is spelled Kors, and put in communism or something, you'll get one of his incredibly stirring lectures. He's just a very, very good advocate of Western society and anti-communism. Oh, and another really cool thing, I'm just now giving out recommendations. Holy shit, you guys, go watch Diana West's latest interview on the Epoch Times. The Epoch Times on YouTube, the American Thought Leaders, I think it's called, the series. She has uncovered, I mean, she's the author who keeps finding communists in the government. And she did that whole book about how communists infiltrated during the FDR years and all the really horrible things they did during World War II and how they made friends with the Soviets and how they sold our secrets and how they got the atomic bomb and just like who was behind all that and that those people are still here. She's written another book showing all of these people involved in the spying on Trump are all former freaking communists or have connections to communists.
Well, Brennan.
Not just Brennan, Comey. Like, I mean, it's like a long, long list. And she did all this research, and that's her new book out. And anyway, she talks about it in this interview with Jan over there at the Epoch Times. So Google that one too.
Definitely.
I can put that in the notes, I guess, today. I'll put all these videos in the notes. Lastly, I just want to mention, and I'm asking you, the audience, I've been approached by a sponsor who's kind of like suggesting that maybe I do another podcast where I do a short, regular podcast, possibly 3 times a week, maybe 5 times a week, 10 minutes, where I just kind of give the news and maybe a little commentary. What do you guys think of that? If I do that, like that would be a big commitment I'd be making. It'd be for a few years. Doug would probably do it with me. He and I would probably switch off or something like that so that it's not such a big burden. So I could he and I could both take vacations once in a while or be sick or whatever and not do it, because that would be really hard. It'd be a current events kind of thing. So we'd have to stay up on it all the time, and you can't really miss a week, because it's current. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Because somebody said that they would financially support something like that if I thought about doing it, and I want to know what you guys think. Or if not that, what would you guys like to see me doing? I should maybe be spending my time back in the comedy realm. I'm not sure. Doug, you got any thoughts on that or anything to add about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I think the daily news thing is really interesting.
It'd be short, like a 10-minute
Yeah, that would be
thing.
very short.
Yeah.
And we have a kind of a unique. I mean, there's a lot of people that do news, so we're trying to offer a more broad perspective on a weekly basis. So the news, I think we could still do that even in 10 minutes. We could still give sort of some big picture stuff and just point to certain topics that we think are like particularly important. So that might be interesting for people. But yeah, no, I would like to see you get more. I mean, we've talked so many times, there's so many projects that we have right now that are piling up, that are excellent, that are funny or interesting, and that you really should be focusing on. So
I know I have all of these. A lot of the things that I would like to be working on right now are writing projects. In fact, 90% of the things that interest me right now personally from a work standpoint are writing projects. So it's writing a TV show script or a sketch comedy script or writing articles or even a couple of book ideas. That would take a lot of time, and I don't know if I could also do a daily podcast, but maybe I could, because to be honest, I'm a news junkie. I get up and every morning, the first hour of my day, I just read news. And if I could literally leave that, sit down, record 10 minutes off the top of my head. And that would be, I could literally do that every day in my sleep. I love radio. I find it super easy. You can tell that I'm very chatty. So it's kind of effortless. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess if I had a sponsor to pay for the production of it and I didn't have to then
I
take
think it fits your
and edit
lifestyle. Your
yeah.
health situation is fit by that too. I would like to get more call-in and interview stuff too. We've had when we have interviews, they're awesome, and I'd love to do that more. But also probably take some live call-ins. I think that would be great too.
Yeah, I would love to switch this podcast to like a live call-in / interview / video show. I don't know if that's even like that's.
Well, we don't even edit it anyways, so why not?
No, we don't edit. We don't edit. I do love having people on the show. We haven't done it. We started out doing that when we started the podcast. That was going to be the format. And we haven't done it because, to be honest, like Doug's super flexible with me. He's my friend. But I felt bad because I'd made a couple of appointments for really good people to call in and be interviewed. And then I had to cancel them because I didn't feel well. And it just made me feel so crappy that I had to like cancel on people I admired and wanted to talk to. I felt like such a schmuck and like, what must they think? You know, people don't really know what's going on with me. I'm not saying, oh, I'm super sick and let me tell you how sick. And I just felt like such a schmuck. I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just going to do what I can, which I know I can do, which is I just call Doug and say, I can't do it right now. Maybe in an hour or maybe tomorrow instead. And he's been super flexible with me. So because we're friends, I don't feel like an asshole for making that request. But I am better. So it's like, I'm starting to feel like maybe we could do this. We could add interviews. I don't know if we could add interviews and calls. I don't know.
Yeah. So let us know.
Yeah. Let us know what you guys want to see from us. What have been your favorite shows? You know, do you like the interview shows better? Do you like it when I have on someone like Alex Marriott? When he comes on and does a history topic, those shows do very well. Very, very well. You guys seem to like that a lot. Yeah, let us know what you think, what you'd like to see me work on, Doug work on. And that's it. That's the end of the show today. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the House of Sunny podcast. Go check out Sunny on YouTube at her channel, House of Sunny. Everything Sunny does is fan-funded, and because she's likely to get kicked off and demonetized on every platform at some point, please support her over at patreon.com/House of Sunny. Become one of Sunny's elite squad and have access to behind-the-scenes footage, t-shirts, special events, and more.